The morning sun poured softly through the glass walls of the mansion, spreading across white marble floors like liquid gold. Amma stood at the entrance, her hands trembling as she clutched her worn leather handbag. Everything about this place felt distant, too quiet, too polished, a world far removed from her own. Her shoes, faded at the edges, made barely a sound as she followed the head housekeeper, Mrs. Lorne, through the long corridor scented faintly of jasmine and polished wood. "This way, dear. Mr. Ethan doesn't like to be kept waiting," Mrs. Lorne said, her voice kind but efficient. Amma nodded, whispering a nervous, "Yes, ma'am." They stopped before a tall oak door. Mrs. Lorne knocked once and opened it. Inside, a man stood by the window, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him. Ethan wore a dark suit, his posture perfect, his presence commanding but weary. He didn't turn right away when Amma entered. Only when her reflection appeared faintly in the glass did he glance back. "Name?" he asked simply. "Amma," she replied softly. "Amadella." He studied her, the calm in her eyes, the humility in her voice. Something about her reminded him of a time he had buried deep, years ago. "You've worked as a maid before?" he asked. "Yes, sir. For 3 years." There was a silence that stretched just long enough for her heart to pound. Then he nodded once. "Mrs. Lorne will show you your duties." The next morning, Amma arrived early, the mansion still quiet, sunlight gliding gently across the endless hallways. Her new uniform, freshly pressed, carried the faint scent of soap. She moved silently from room to room, dusting, arranging flowers, and memorizing every polished surface she'd now call her workspace. When she entered the study, her steps slowed. The room was filled with books and faint traces of nostalgia. Framed photos on mahogany shelves, silver picture frames lined neatly across the desk. She reached for a cloth, careful not to disturb anything, until her eyes caught one frame in particular. A photograph of a young woman, elegant, smiling, holding a newborn wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The baby's tiny face was turned toward the camera, and something in his expression made Amma freeze. Her breath hitched. The small curl of his lips, the curve of his nose, the faint birthmark beneath his left eye. She felt her knees weaken. It couldn't be. No, it wasn't possible. She blinked hard and leaned closer, heart pounding so loudly she feared it might echo in the silent room. The name carved neatly at the bottom of the frame read, "Ethan Jr., born April 15th. Her fingers trembled. That date. It was the same day her son Liam was born. "Amma?" Mrs. Lorne's voice startled her from behind. The older woman stood at the doorway, eyes narrowing slightly, noticing Amma's pale face. "Everything all right, dear?" Amma quickly nodded, setting the frame back in place. Amma could barely focus on her chores that afternoon. Every sound in the mansion, the ticking of the antique clock, the whisper of the wind through the garden glass doors, seemed to amplify the storm in her mind. The photo wouldn't leave her thoughts. That child, Ethan Jr. The resemblance was undeniable. But how could her son Liam look so much like the billionaire's baby? As she scrubbed the marble counter in the kitchen, her reflection trembled in the silver pot before her. Fragments of memory returned. The night she lost everything. The charity gala 5 years ago, when she was hired as a server for an exclusive event in the city. She remembered the candlelight, the orchestra, the laughter of people who lived above the clouds. And she remembered him, Ethan. That night he had been different, smiling, almost human beneath the suit and fortune. He'd found her crying near the kitchen door, humiliated after another server spilled wine on her uniform. "Don't cry," he'd said then, handing her his handkerchief. His voice had been soft, almost kind. For one night, their worlds had collided, Brief, impossible, but real. Then came the morning after. Confusion, shame, and a letter of dismissal. He never saw her again. She'd carried Liam alone, never daring to tell anyone who the father was. She never even knew his name, only that he was a powerful man she'd never meet again. Until now. Her hands stopped scrubbing. The realization weighed like a stone in her chest. Fate had brought her back here, inside his home, cleaning the very floors her son's father walked on. From upstairs, she heard Ethan's voice calling for coffee, the same tone she remembered from that night. Deep, calm, and familiar enough to make her heart stumble. Amma steadied her breathing and whispered to herself. Amma carried the tray carefully up the grand staircase, the silver teapot trembling slightly in her hands. The afternoon light spilled through the tall windows, catching dust motes in the air like tiny, drifting stars. She could hear Ethan's voice faintly through the half-open study door, calm, decisive, commanding. Every step closer made her pulse race faster. She knocked softly. "Sir, your coffee." "Come in," his voice replied, clipped and professional. Amma stepped inside. He was seated behind a massive desk, the skyline glowing behind him like molten glass. He didn't look up at first, his attention buried in documents and phone calls, his tone precise as he spoke into a Bluetooth headset. Amma waited quietly, setting the tray down on the side table. When he finally ended the call and turned toward her, their eyes met. And for a brief moment, the world stilled. Ethan froze. Something in her face caught him completely off guard. Those eyes, the calm, soft brown that mirrored a memory buried deep in his mind. "Thank you," he said after a pause, his tone softening slightly. Amma lowered her gaze quickly. "You're welcome, sir." He studied her movements as she adjusted the tray, careful, graceful, too composed for someone of her position. There was something haunting about her presence, familiar yet distant. "How long have you been working here?" he asked suddenly. "Just started yesterday, sir." 2 days later, the mansion felt warmer than usual. Sunlight stretched lazily across the living room where Amma dusted the shelves. The silence was suddenly broken by a sound she hadn't heard in years, the giggle of a child. It echoed faintly from the hallway, soft yet contagious. Curious, Amma turned and saw a little boy running past, about 4 years old, dressed neatly in a tiny vest and khaki shorts. His golden curls bounced with every step, his smile bright enough to light the room. "Slow down, Ethan Jr.," Mrs. Lorne called from behind, slightly out of breath. The boy stopped right in front of Amma, curious eyes locking onto hers, and for a second, time simply stopped. His eyes, hazel, gentle, were the same as Liam's, the same as hers. Amma knelt slowly, her hands trembling. "Hello there," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy tilted his head, studying her. "You're new," he said matter-of-factly, his tone innocent and confident all at once. "What's your name?" "Amma." He smiled, toothy and bright. "I'm Ethan. Daddy says I'm the man of the house now." Her heart twisted. "I can see that," she whispered, smiling faintly. Before she could say more, Mrs. Lorne caught up to them. "Come now, young sir. Your father's waiting." She gave Amma a look that lingered, protective, almost warning. Amma stood as they walked away, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. That boy wasn't just Ethan's son, he was Liam's mirror. The same eyes, the same small dimple when he smiled. She pressed a hand against her chest, whispering to herself, "No, it can't be." But as the sound of his laughter echoed down the hall, she felt something break inside her, a longing so deep it reached into every corner of her heart. The child she'd raised alone was gone, but somehow, a reflection of him lived right here. That night, Amma couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her small bed in the servants' quarters, the hum of the mansion's silence pressing down on her like a weight. The faint glow from her bedside lamp illuminated an old, creased photograph. Liam at 3 years old, smiling in front of their tiny apartment window, wearing his favorite blue jumper. His dimple peeked at the corner of his mouth, identical to little Ethan's. Amma traced her finger over the picture, tears threatening to fall. 2 boys, born the same day, with the same face. Her mind replayed every detail, the way Ethan's son looked at her, the warmth in his laugh, even the small scar above his eyebrow. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. "Amma?" Mrs. Lorne's voice called quietly from the hallway. Amma quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door. "Yes, ma'am." The older woman stepped inside, holding a folded blanket. "You left this in the laundry. I thought you might need it. It's getting cold." "Thank you," Amma said, forcing a small smile. Mrs. Lorne lingered for a moment, her sharp eyes scanning Amma's face. "You've been quiet since morning. Is something wrong?" Amma hesitated, then shook her head. "No, ma'am. I'm just tired." The older woman nodded slowly, her gaze softening. "You know, this house has seen more secrets than smiles. Be careful what you hold inside." When she left, Amma sat back down, her heart thudding painfully. Those words felt too pointed, too knowing. She turned off the light and lay down, staring at the ceiling in the dark. What if Mrs. Lorne already knew? The morning arrived wrapped in golden sunlight and quiet tension. Amma stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast, silver trays gleaming, the scent of freshly baked croissants filling the air. Her hands moved mechanically, but her thoughts were miles away. Every clink of a plate reminded her that upstairs, the man she once knew was waiting, and the child who mirrored her own was about to eat at his table. Mrs. Lorne entered briskly, adjusting her apron. "Mr. Ethan wants breakfast served on the terrace today," she said. "You'll assist me." Amma nodded, her heart tightening. She'd avoided being near him since their last meeting, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Minutes later, she followed Mrs. Lorne to the open-air terrace overlooking the garden. Ethan sat at the head of the table, the morning paper in one hand, his son seated beside him, swinging his legs happily. The sunlight painted them both in a soft, warm glow, father and child, a picture of perfection that tore at Amma's chest. "Good morning, sir," Amma said quietly as she set down the tray. Ethan looked up briefly, offering a polite nod. "Morning." As she poured his coffee, little Ethan's voice piped up cheerfully. "Daddy, Amma makes the best pancakes. I saw her yesterday in the kitchen." Amma froze mid-pour. Ethan's brow lifted slightly, a faint smile forming. "Is that so?" Mrs. Lorne chuckled. "Seems she's already made a friend, sir." Amma smiled weakly, her heart racing. "He's very kind." Ethan's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than they should have, a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps recognition. Then, softly, he said, "You remind me of someone I met years ago." Someone. I should have remembered. Amma's hands trembled, and a drop of coffee splashed onto the saucer. She quickly wiped it away, hiding her face. She didn't need to ask who he was talking about. Later that evening, the mansion had fallen into a hush. The chandeliers dimmed, and soft piano music played from the hall. A haunting tune that lingered like a memory refusing to fade. Amma was alone in the library, dusting shelves she'd already cleaned twice. It wasn't about the books. It was about escaping her thoughts. Her eyes wandered to the mahogany desk near the window, Ethan's desk. Papers lay scattered across it, as if he'd left in a hurry. She hesitated, glancing toward the door before reaching out to arrange them neatly. That's when she saw it. A small, yellowed envelope tucked between the pages of an old leather notebook. Her fingers brushed over the faded ink. "To Amma." Her breath caught. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. She looked around, no one in sight, then carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting was unmistakably his. "If you ever read this, I want you to know that I never forgot you. The night you left, I waited, I searched, but life moved faster than my heart could chase. I hope you're safe wherever you are." Her vision blurred. Tears fell silently onto the page, staining the years between them. She pressed the letter to her chest, trembling as memories flooded back. The night she'd been forced to leave without goodbye, the promises that had turned to silence. Behind her, footsteps approached. Amma quickly folded the letter and slipped it into her apron just as the door opened. Ethan stepped in, surprise flickering across his face. "Amma? I didn't expect anyone here." "I was just finishing the dusting, sir," she said softly, avoiding his eyes. He nodded slowly. The next morning broke with a silver mist hanging low over the estate's garden. Amma stood by the nursery window, her eyes tracing the outlines of the hedges, the fountain, the sprawling lawns that once felt like another world. The baby cooed softly in his crib, sunlight dancing over his delicate face. For a fleeting second, Amma imagined what it would be like if this were her life. If she belonged here not as a maid, but as someone whose presence mattered. A knock startled her. She turned to find Ethan at the door, dressed casually for once, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, the kind of softness she hadn't seen since the days they were just Ethan and Amma. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, stepping in carefully. "I just wanted to check on him." Amma smiled faintly. "He's fine. Always is when you're near." He paused, catching something in her tone. Warmth laced with distance. His gaze drifted to the small dresser near the crib. There, half tucked beneath a toy, was a worn photograph. He reached for it and froze. It was them. Younger, freer, standing together by the sea years ago. She was laughing. He was looking at her like she was sunlight. Ethan's throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" Amma's eyes darted to the photo, her breath faltering. "It was inside one of the boxes when I started here. I didn't think you'd want it thrown away." He turned the photo over. The back read, "For when I forget what happiness looks like." His handwriting. A long silence followed, the air heavy with memories that neither dared to speak. Finally, Amma said softly, "Maybe it's best forgotten." Ethan shook his head slowly, voice breaking. "Some things aren't meant to be forgotten." Their eyes met, the kind of look that reaches across years, pain, and what-ifs. Then the baby's cry broke the moment, pulling them both back to reality. Amma turned away, picking up the child, rocking him gently as tears glistened in her eyes. Behind her, Ethan slipped the photograph. That evening, the mansion was alive with the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses. Ethan was hosting a small dinner for investors, men in tailored suits, women in diamond smiles. The chandelier glowed above the grand dining hall, casting soft golden light on crystal and silverware. Amma moved silently between the guests, her posture perfect, her steps measured. She'd worn her usual maid uniform, crisp, clean, and painfully modest, yet tonight, for reasons she couldn't name, she felt every glance that passed her way. The laughter, the wine, the polished perfection, it all felt like a world she'd never belonged to. From the head of the table, Ethan watched her more than he should have. She was grace in motion, steady hands, quiet eyes that held too much history. When she leaned to pour wine beside him, their fingers brushed. Just a second. But the spark was undeniable. Across the table, a guest noticed. "Mr. Kane," one of the investors said with a grin, "your staff is impeccable." That one in particular. She carries herself differently. Ethan forced a polite laugh. "She's one of my best." Amma felt her stomach twist. One of his best. That's all she'd ever be. She moved away, cheeks flushed, trying to ignore the ache blooming in her chest. Later, after the dinner ended, Ethan found her in the kitchen. The hum of the dishwasher filled the silence between them. "You shouldn't have to do this after serving all night," he said softly. She didn't look up. "It's my job, sir." He hesitated, then held out a small, cream-colored envelope. "There's a charity dinner this weekend. I want you to come, as a guest." Amma blinked, stunned. "A guest? I can't." The day of the charity dinner arrived with a kind of nervous electricity that Amma couldn't shake. She stood before the mirror in her small quarters, staring at the plain uniform that had defined her life inside the mansion. But tonight, things would be different. Ethan had arranged it that way. A knock came at her door. When she opened it, she found a box, elegant, ivory-colored, with a small card attached. The handwriting was unmistakable. "For tonight. Don't hide who you are." Inside lay a dress, a deep emerald green gown, soft as water under her fingertips. It shimmered faintly under the dim light, simple yet impossibly beautiful. Amma's breath hitched. For a moment she couldn't move. It felt like a dream too fragile to touch. With trembling hands she slipped it on. The fabric hugged her form delicately, the color deepening against her skin. Her reflection caught her off guard. She looked different. Not a maid, not invisible, a woman. When she stepped into the hallway, the other staff stared in silent awe. No one had ever seen her like this. Ethan was waiting at the base of the grand staircase. He wore a charcoal suit, classic and sharp, but when he saw her descending the stairs, time stopped. His lips parted slightly, words lost. The woman before him wasn't the maid who dusted books or folded linens. She was the Amma he once knew, radiant, poised, unforgettable. "You look," he started, voice low, "extraordinary." Amma smiled shyly, looking down. "It's your dress, sir." "No," he said gently. "It's you." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the years of distance between them collapsed. But just as quickly, reality returned. He extended his hand. "Shall we?" Amma hesitated before taking it. The warmth of his touch lingered. The ballroom was a sea of gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across the marble floor, and violins whispered softly beneath the low hum of laughter and champagne flutes. Amma had never seen anything like it. The air smelled of perfume and wealth, heavy, intoxicating, unreal. Ethan led her through the crowd, his hand at her back in a gesture both protective and careful. Every eye seemed to follow them. Men in tuxedos, women in jeweled gowns. Whispers trailed behind her like perfume. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "She's stunning." "Wait, isn't she one of his staff?" Amma heard it all. Each word stung, but she held her chin high. She'd promised herself she wouldn't shrink tonight, not here, not in front of him. They reached their table near the stage. Ethan pulled out her chair, an act that drew a few startled glances from nearby guests. But he didn't care. His attention was on her, as if the rest of the room didn't exist. As dinner was served, Ethan introduced her to a few guests, philanthropists, investors, old friends of his late wife. Amma smiled politely, her heart pounding. Every movement felt deliberate, every word a careful balance between humility and grace. At one point, a woman in pearls leaned forward, her smile too sharp to be kind. "You have such poise," she said sweetly. "Did you and Ethan meet through one of his outreach programs?" Amma froze, unsure how to respond. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Amma smiled softly. "Something like that," she said. "He's always been generous." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, but Ethan's quiet, approving glance gave Amma strength. Later, as the music swelled and the dance floor opened, Ethan extended his hand again. "One dance," he said. She hesitated, then nodded. They moved together beneath the light. By morning, the mansion buzzed with whispers. The charity gala had barely ended before rumors began weaving their way through the marble halls and polished corridors. It started with the kitchen staff, a passing comment, a curious smile. Then it spread to the drivers, the assistants, the housekeepers. By noon, even the estate's gardener had heard. Mr. Kane brought a maid to the gala. Amma felt it immediately. The stares lingered longer, conversations hushed the moment she entered a room. What had been a home she could move through quietly was now a maze of judgment. In the laundry room, two of the maids spoke in low voices, unaware that Amma stood just behind the doorway. She was there, in that green dress. Looked like she belonged to him. Belonged? The other scoffed. Don't be naive. Men like him don't love women like us. Amma stepped back, heart pounding. She didn't blame them. They weren't cruel. They were just saying what the world always had. Still, it hurt. Later that day, Ethan entered the library where Amma was folding linens, an excuse to keep herself busy. "You've been quiet," he said, closing the door behind him. "People are talking," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Let them." "You don't understand," Amma said, finally meeting his gaze. "I can lose everything because of talk like this. You'll be fine, but me?" Her voice cracked. "I'll be the one they point at." Ethan's expression softened, but guilt shadowed his eyes. "I never meant to make things harder for you." Amma shook her head. "You didn't. The world did." Silence stretched between them, heavy, tender, impossible. Then Ethan stepped closer. "Amma," he said softly, "if I could rewrite how the world sees us, I would." The next morning dawned gray and heavy, a storm gathering over the horizon. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was no different. Every step Amma took seemed to echo louder than usual. Every whisper seemed sharper. She could feel the shift. Respect replaced by suspicion, silence by stares. Mrs. Delaney summoned her to the office. The older woman sat behind a polished oak desk, posture rigid, eyes cold but not unkind. She'd been in service for decades, loyal to the Kane family, protector of their reputation. "Amma," she began, her voice calm but cutting. "I need to speak with you about recent events." Amma clasped her hands in front of her. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Delaney studied her for a long moment before continuing. "You attended the charity gala with Mr. Kane." "Yes, he invited me." "That invitation," Mrs. Delaney said sharply, "has caused quite a stir. You must understand how things appear. A staff member, a maid, on the arm of a man like Mr. Kane? The society pages are already circling the story." Amma's heart sank. "I didn't mean for anyone to—" Mrs. Delaney held up a hand. "Intentions don't matter. Appearances do." Amma's throat tightened. "Are you asking me to leave?" There was a pause. The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Not yet. Mr. Kane values your service, and I won't dismiss you without cause. But consider this a warning. Distance yourself. Be discreet. Whatever history you share with him, bury it." The words struck like stones. "History?" Amma whispered. Mrs. Delaney's gaze sharpened. "I've been in this house long enough to recognize when something unspoken lingers between two people. You care for him, and he for you, but feelings like that have no place here." 2 days later, chaos broke through the calm. It began with a phone vibrating violently on Ethan's desk during a morning meeting. His assistant, pale-faced, leaned in and whispered, "Sir, it's about you." "It's everywhere." He frowned, unlocking his phone, and there it was. A headline splashed across every gossip page, every social media feed. "Billionaire Ethan Kane spotted with mystery woman at gala, not just an employee." Below it, a photograph. Amma, radiant in her emerald dress, her hand resting delicately on Ethan's arm as they danced beneath the chandelier's glow. The angle was perfect, intimate, incriminating. The room spun for a moment. Ethan closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "Who leaked this?" His assistant shook his head. "No one knows, but the press wants a statement." Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, Amma stared at the same image on a small tablet a younger maid had shown her, wide-eyed. "Is that really you, Amma?" Amma's hands trembled. "Where did you get this?" "It's all over the internet," the girl whispered. "People are saying, 'Enough!'" Amma said sharply, her voice breaking. She rushed out before anyone could see her cry. She found refuge in the empty nursery, the only place that still felt innocent. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, the same face, but now a symbol of scandal. Moments later, the door opened quietly. Ethan stepped inside, holding his phone. Their eyes met, and for the first time, he saw fear in hers. "I'm so sorry," he said. Amma shook her head. "They're saying things I can't take back. They'll never let me live this down." "I'll handle it," Ethan said firmly. "I'll make a statement." "No!" Amma's voice cracked. "You'll only make it worse. Please." By dawn, the mansion was surrounded. News vans lined the front gates, microphones and cameras aimed like weapons of curiosity. Headlines screamed across every channel. "Billionaire and his maid, forbidden affair?" Ethan sat in his office, the weight of the scandal pressing against him like the storm outside. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Investors demanding answers, publicists urging damage control, friends advising silence. But silence wasn't an option anymore. "Sir," said his PR manager through the speakerphone, "the best move is to control the narrative. Sit down for an interview, tell your side." Ethan's voice was low, controlled. "And what exactly do they want me to say? That she's just an employee, that the rumors are baseless, that there's nothing between you." He looked toward the window where rain streaked down the glass. His reflection looked tired, older somehow. "And if that's not true?" he murmured. There was silence on the other end. "Then, sir, you'll lose everything." Ethan's jaw tightened. Then so be it. Hours later, the interview lights glared down on him. Across from him sat a reporter, poised, sharp, ready to draw blood. "Mr. Kane," she began, "the world wants to know, who is the woman in that photograph?" He hesitated, his fingers tightening slightly. "Her name is Amma." The reporter leaned forward. "And what is she to you?" Ethan's mind flashed through years of memories, laughter, loss, letters never sent. "She's someone who's been part of my life longer than most realize," he said finally. The reporter's eyes gleamed. "So the rumors are true?" He exhaled slowly. "The rumors are cruel. But the truth is, she's someone I care about deeply." Gasps rippled across the crew. Phones buzzed instantly. The confession was already spreading. When the interview ended, Ethan walked out into the corridor, the weight of his choice pressing hard on his chest. Back at the mansion, Amma watched from the small television in the laundry room. She sat frozen, tears welling up as his words echoed through the static. By sunrise, the interview had gone viral. Every platform replayed the same clip. Ethan Kane, composed yet raw, admitting feelings for the woman the world only knew as the Maid. It was the confession no one expected, and everyone wanted to dissect. The consequences came fast. The stock for Kane Industries dipped by 7% before noon. Ethan's business partners began withdrawing from deals. Reporters swarmed outside the mansion gates, their voices rising above the security guards' shouts. Inside, the once calm estate felt like a cage. Staff whispered in corners. Mrs. Delaney kept her distance but watched Amma with something that looked almost like pity. Amma spent the morning folding linens in the laundry room, trying to pretend the world wasn't burning around her. But every ring of the phone, every buzz of a notification, reminded her it was real. When Ethan finally appeared, he looked exhausted. His tie loosened, his eyes red-rimmed. "Amma," he said softly. She didn't look up. "You shouldn't have said it." I meant every word. That's not the point, she snapped, louder than she intended. You don't understand what this will do, not just to you, but to me, to my life, my family. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. I know exactly what it will do, but I'm done living by rules written by people who've never known love. Amma turned, eyes glistening. This isn't a love story, Ethan. It's a scandal. They'll twist it, ruin it, and in the end you'll move on. But I'll be the one left carrying the shame. Her words hit him like stones. For once, he had no argument. A knock on the door broke the silence. Mrs. Delaney stood there, her expression grave. Mr. Kane, the board is requesting an emergency meeting. They're not pleased. Ethan nodded, voice tight. I'll handle it. As she left, Amma's composure cracked. By the next morning, the house was unnervingly quiet. The usual hum of staff chatter and clinking breakfast trays had vanished. The storm outside had calmed, but inside Ethan's mansion, another one was brewing. Amma sat at the small wooden desk in the staff quarters, a single sheet of paper before her. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote the words that would end everything. Mr. Kane, thank you for your kindness and the opportunities you've given me. But for the good of us both, I must leave. This world is not made for people like me to stay in yours. She signed her name, a tear dropping onto the page, blurring the ink. It wasn't weakness, it was release. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into a white envelope before sliding it under Ethan's study door. Ethan discovered it hours later. The moment his eyes caught her name, his chest tightened. He tore it open, reading the short, painfully polite goodbye. By the end, his vision blurred. He rushed through the halls calling her name, but the rooms only echoed back his desperation. The gardener told him she'd left just after dawn. One small suitcase, no chauffeur, no destination. In that moment, Ethan Kane, the billionaire who'd once controlled entire markets with a phone call, realized how powerless he truly was. He drove out himself, rain streaking the windshield, chasing faint traces of her. A silhouette at a bus stop, a familiar figure by the roadside. But every time, it wasn't her. Back at the mansion, Mrs. Delaney watched from the balcony as Ethan returned, drenched and defeated. You can't chase someone who's already chosen her peace, she said softly. He didn't respond. Instead, he went to his study, the resignation letter still in his hand, and placed it inside the glass case where he kept his most valuable artifacts. Not as a reminder of loss, but of something money could never replace. Amma, meanwhile, sat in a corner. Days turned into weeks, yet the mansion remained frozen in silence. Once filled with laughter, the patter of little feet, and the faint scent of Amma's freshly baked bread, it now echoed with absence. Every corner whispered her name. Ethan moved through his own home like a ghost. The staff tiptoed around him, unsure whether to speak or stay invisible. The baby's nursery, once a warm, joyful room, had become a place he avoided. He'd pause by the door sometimes, his hand hovering on the knob, but he could never bring himself to enter. Inside, the baby's toys lay untouched. The crib stood empty. The faint smell of lavender lotion still lingered in the air. Amma's gentle touch woven into the walls. Ethan had replaced CEOs and negotiated billion-dollar contracts with ease, but nothing in his life had prepared him for the hollow quiet she left behind. He tried to fill the void with work. Board meetings, charity galas, business flights. He immersed himself in them all. But even in crowded rooms, his thoughts drifted back to her. The way she smiled softly when she held his son, the sound of her laugh, the sincerity in her eyes that money couldn't buy. Mrs. Delaney, the head housekeeper, watched him from a distance. One morning, she entered his study and found him sitting at his desk, staring blankly at the resignation letter again. You can't build walls high enough to forget her, she said quietly. Ethan's voice cracked, almost a whisper. She was the first person who didn't want anything from me. Outside, the gardens Amma used to tend had overgrown. Flowers drooped, vines crawled across the stone walls, and the once perfect lawn looked wild, like the mansion itself had lost its order, mirroring the chaos in Ethan's heart. A soft drizzle blanketed the city that morning, the kind of rain that blurred the skyline and made everything feel slower, gentler. Ethan sat by his window, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the empty garden below. The gate creaked. A delivery man in a soaked uniform approached, holding a small brown envelope sealed with a faint scent of lavender. "From Ms. Amma," the man said. Ethan's heartbeat stumbled. It had been nearly 2 months since she left. He signed without a word, closing the door with trembling fingers. The envelope felt impossibly light in his hands, as though it held the weight of his entire heart. He sat at his desk, staring at her handwriting. The familiar curves of her letters brought back memories he'd buried under work and silence. With a deep breath, he unfolded the paper. "Mr. Kane," it began, "if you're reading this, please don't be angry. I left because I couldn't stay and keep breaking every boundary I swore I wouldn't cross. You were kind, too kind, but I was losing myself, and I couldn't take your world's pity or your power. The baby reminded me of everything I lost and everything I could never have." Her words felt like shards of glass. Ethan's throat tightened as he read on. "I didn't mean to cause pain. You gave me dignity when the world saw a servant. I hope someday you'll tell your son about the woman who loved him like her own, and who left before love could destroy her. Take care of him, and please, take care of yourself." At the bottom of the letter there was a pressed flower, a small white daisy from the garden she once tended. Its petals were fragile, yet preserved with care. Ethan exhaled shakily, leaning back in his chair. The rain outside had turned to sunlight, filtering through the window in golden streaks. He looked down at the flower again, realizing she had left not in bitterness, but in love. He pressed the letter to his chest. "You didn't destroy me, Amma," he whispered. "You reminded me I was human." For the first time in weeks, he smiled faintly. Not because the pain was gone. It was a quiet morning in the Kane mansion, one of those rare days when the sun spilled through the glass walls, filling the rooms with warmth. Ethan sat in the living room with his son, a chubby little boy who was now crawling fast enough to make the nannies nervous. The air was lighter than usual, though traces of melancholy still hung around the edges. The child babbled endlessly, clutching a small wooden rattle Amma had carved for him. Ethan couldn't help but smile every time he saw it. The handmade gift stood out among all the expensive toys money could buy. The baby shook it joyfully, then looked up at his father with wide, curious eyes. Ethan leaned closer. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You miss her too, don't you?" The baby stared at him, lips trembling in an attempt to form a sound. Then, in the smallest, clearest voice, he said, "Amma." Ethan froze. The world seemed to stop. The clock ticked faintly in the distance, the sunlight flickered across the marble floor, but all he could hear was that one word, echoing again and again. The baby repeated it, smiling this time, clapping his tiny hands. "Amma! Amma!" Ethan's throat tightened. He picked his son up, holding him close against his chest, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Tears slid down his face before he could stop them. "She's not here, little one," he whispered, voice trembling. "But she'll always be with us." The nanny standing nearby turned away discreetly, pretending not to notice the billionaire's tears. Ethan didn't care. For the first time he let himself cry openly, not out of guilt, but gratitude. That night, after the baby fell asleep, Ethan went into the garden. The moonlight cast silver patterns across the flowers Amma once tended. He placed the pressed daisy from her letter under the soil and whispered, "He said your name today." The wind stirred the trees softly, almost like a reply, gentle, familiar, and forgiving. In that moment, months passed before Ethan finally gathered the courage to trace the address Amma had written on the back of her letter. It was a small village, miles away from the city, a place where time seemed slower, and people still greeted strangers with open hands and guarded smiles. He left the mansion behind for a day, driving himself for the first time in years. The sleek black car stood out awkwardly among the dusty roads and simple houses. Children chased chickens across the path, women sold fruits by woven baskets, and the smell of roasted corn lingered in the breeze. It was peaceful, painfully peaceful. Ethan stopped near a small cottage with white curtains fluttering through its window. A woman, older and kind-faced, stepped out to greet him. "You must be Mr. Kane," she said softly, her accent warm. "Amma told us you might come one day." His chest tightened. She told you about me?" The woman nodded and led him inside. The house was humble, filled with quiet charm. Wooden furniture, faded family photos, and a faint trace of lavender in the air. On the wall hung a framed picture of Amma holding a baby, not his son, but a younger sibling she had helped raise before life took its cruel turns. "She left this village after her parents passed," the woman explained gently. "Said she wanted to make a life worth remembering. She worked hard, too hard. Always said she was caring for someone else's child as if it were her own." Ethan's gaze fell to the small bookshelf near the window. On it sat a few children's books, worn but neatly stacked, the same kind Amma had read to his son. Inside one, he found a small folded note written in her handwriting. "If he ever finds this, tell him I forgave him before he even asked." His vision blurred as he held the paper. The ache that had haunted him for months began to ease, replaced by something softer, purer: forgiveness. The drive back to the city felt different this time. The roads looked familiar, yet the weight in Ethan's chest had lightened. As he passed through the bustling streets, his thoughts weren't filled with regrets anymore, but with purpose. Amma's letter, her words, her garden, they had all planted something in him, something alive. A week later, Ethan called for a press conference, his first in months. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, curious about what the elusive billionaire had to say after vanishing from public view. When he finally took the stage, there was no grandeur in his tone, no calculated confidence, just calm sincerity. "Today," he began, "I'm launching a foundation, the Amma Grace Initiative. It's dedicated to helping single mothers, caregivers, and women who sacrifice everything for families that aren't even theirs." His voice wavered slightly, but he didn't hide it. "Someone once reminded me that love isn't defined by blood or status. It's defined by compassion." The room fell into a hush. He continued, speaking about childcare centers, scholarships, and health support for women in underprivileged areas. It wasn't about charity. It was about dignity, about rewriting the story for people like Amma, who gave their hearts quietly in the shadows. When the press conference ended, Ethan didn't stay for the applause. He walked out into the sunlight, his steps lighter than they had been in years. He looked up, feeling the warmth against his skin, and whispered under his breath, "You did this, Amma. Not me." Back home, he set a small framed photo of her garden on his desk, beside the daisy she once pressed in her letter. Every time he glanced at it, he remembered that love can be reborn in what we choose to build from pain. The mansion no longer felt empty. Laughter slowly returned with the baby's giggles, with music in the halls, with hope. And when he stood by the nursery window at night, watching the city lights flicker, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. A year passed. Seasons changed, the city grew louder, and life slowly found rhythm again in the Kane mansion. The Ama Grace initiative flourished. Shelters were built, women empowered, children educated. Her name became a symbol of compassion, whispered with reverence. Yet for Ethan, it was never about legacy. It was about memory, keeping her alive in the small, quiet ways. One late afternoon, as golden sunlight poured through the nursery window, Ethan played on the floor with his son. The boy was walking now, curious, determined, full of laughter. He reached for his father's face, his tiny hand smudging a streak of cookie dough on Ethan's cheek. Ethan laughed softly, brushing the crumbs away. "You've got your mother's stubbornness," he murmured, smiling at the memory of Ama's fierce yet gentle eyes. A knock sounded at the front door. Ethan stood, carrying the boy in his arms. The butler moved to answer it, but Ethan stopped him. Something about the knock felt familiar. He opened the door himself. There, on the porch, stood Ama. She looked thinner, her eyes weary yet bright. A simple dress, her hair tied back, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment neither spoke. The air was still. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. "Mr. Kane," she whispered, voice breaking. "I heard what you did. The foundation. I had to come back, to say thank you." Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Ama," he said softly, the name tasting like sunlight after a long winter. "You don't have to thank me. You changed me." Her gaze shifted to the child in his arms. The boy blinked once, then smiled, reaching toward her. "Ama," he said clearly. Tears welled in her eyes as she took his tiny hand. "You remembered me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's throat tightened. He never forgot. For a long moment they stood there, a billionaire, a maid, and a child, bound not by